The time is 3:09 p.m., and I would like to call to order the meeting of Committee of the Whole for Tuesday, September 9th, 2024. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Alderwoman Schweitzer.
Present.
Alderman Oldenburg. Alderman Cone.
Present.
Alderman Narayan. Alderman Balmer. Alderwoman Velazquez. Alderwoman Sanier.
Present.
Alderwoman Spencer. Alderman Browning.
Present.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard.
Here.
Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Boyd. Alderman Aldridge.
Present.
President Green. Alderman Oldenburg.
Present.
Alderman Narayan.
Here.
Alderman Balmer. Alderwoman Velazquez.
Present.
Alderwoman Spencer.
Here.
Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Boyd. President Green. 10 present, you have quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk, and members of the board. We will dispense with line items 2 through 5 on our agenda and jump right to our first guest, who I'm very glad to be joining us, which will be Treasurer Lane with a report on the RAM Settlement Fund.
Have some things. All right, thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Adam Lane. I humbly serve as the treasurer for the city of St. Louis, and I have a present. I'll speak up then.
Is your mic green?
It is green. It's just
You're a
low.
little tall. You might have to.
So I'll start over. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Madam Chair. My name is Adam Lane. I humbly serve as the treasurer for the city of St. Louis, and I have a presentation prepared. A brief presentation just to give an update on where the REM settlement dollars are. And although I don't have any decision-making power, just some suggestions and thought that I've given to it that I would love to impart on this body. Is the presentation gonna be on the screen or?
Yes,
Oh, it is?
one
Okay.
second.
I'll be patient.
Just for an update for folks, while we wait for that to go cleared up, Treasurer Lane is just going to be giving us a report on the current status, on the amount of funds that we have in the bank, the interest that's been generated, and any other important information about the pool of money and that he'd like us to know.
Absolutely. And then the first two slides, I can actually start talking about those. It's just an introduction. So the last time we gave this update was this month last year. So a year's time has passed and more than a year since we received the funds and started investing them, which is why it is timely to give this update. The second slide really just talks about my office and the role that I have. So part of my duties are to manage our investment accounts. And during the time that I've taken over since 2021, we've been able to grow that from about 450 million to 780 million. And that 780 number has grown about 5% since the time that I last presented to this board. So the city's investment accounts are pretty healthy and growing. What my department also does is provide account reconciliation for the other city departments that we have, as well as approve our city depositories and bank partners, which we will be formally approving soon in the form of our funds committee meeting, which will be coming up. I'll keep moving because it's more info. But what I'll be doing is just giving everyone an account of the current balances that we have. And it's balances plural because there are different types of accounts. It's just 3 accounts, and I'll explain the difference between those accounts, letting you all know about the fund strategy that we're implementing, and also giving you a market update. So you know what interest rates are looking like, how we're looking to pivot and move forward with the current balances that we have in lieu of any decisions that you all make.
And for members of the board, you all should have this presentation in the drive. Okay, let's take a 5-minute recess while they get this technology figured out.
And we can skip ahead several slides, so just, yep, next one. Nope, keep going. Keep going. Right. So here's where we'll start. So last year, this time, again, we had an initial allocation of 180 million, which came into the city, and immediately put that into a few interest-bearing accounts. And after that time, we had rated about 7 million in interest earnings, bringing that total as of September 2023 to 287. 294, 639. And if we go to the next slide, you can see where we are now. So we've earned about 22 million total in interest. Interest rates have been very favorable, and it brings that total balance to about 302 million. So around this time last year, interest rates were spiking. We didn't know if we were headed to some sort of brief recession or a rapid interest rate slowing or interest rate environment that would be rapidly declining. That's what we thought. Didn't happen. Rates have stayed pretty consistent. We're not up in the high fives and sixes like we were a year and some change ago, but we're still very healthily at 5. And just for historical reference, usually with our investment accounts for the city, investing in the very safe things that we can, we're at 1%. So these are unprecedented times. We can go to the next slide. Okay. This is just looking at where we were last year, last year this time versus this year. So the only big thing that, and you'll see why on the next slide, but the only big thing is that second line going from 196 to 248. So that's where we earn, of course, the most interest. But we also moved a lot of funds out of the liquid account into the term account. And the reason for that is just a higher rate. So we did have a big chunk in the liquid account, and just for everyone's edification, it being liquid means it's more easily accessible. So we're looking at shorter durations, money that we can call for anything that we're going to do. Once we knew that this body was going to engage in a longer process to get input from the community and make some longer term decisions, we were able to put it in a more advantageous account. Go to the next one. Cool. And again, why? So as you can see where rates were before, again, higher, but not a significant drop off. But where we saw the highest rates, we just made sure that we allocated more to that most term account. Next slide. Cool. So a year ago, one of the things that I was saying, which I briefly just explained, was that we wanted to continue monitoring where rates were going to go because we really didn't know if they would continue, if they would. We knew they would decrease, but we didn't know how sharply they would. There hasn't been as sharp a decrease as we thought, so we still have some short-term positions, but we also are trying to capitalize off of some long-term positions to make sure that we're capitalizing off the best rates possible, making the most of our investments. And then we wanted to be able to support you all with, when those decisions got made, figuring out a cash flow strategy that still allows us to invest as much as possible, but spend what we need to spend. So for example, if there was a $50 million project, that doesn't mean that we put all 200, well now 300 million into a liquid account, because that's going to yield a lower rate, but making sure that we're allocating and right sizing to get to the desired results that you all have for spending, but also making sure that we're building our cash flow and reserves from what's not being spent as well, and not just letting it sit and not gain as much money as it can. Next slide. Cool. So looking forward, again, I know I don't have any decision-making power, but a couple of things that I will say. One, I think generative ideas, especially for the city of St. Louis, are going to be important. I am in favor of the endowment fund for three main reasons. One, the perpetuity of it. When we have an endowment fund and we live off the interest, that can be forever. So that is a great thing to have, knowing that needs of the city are going to change, emergent needs of the city change, and being able to, that third point, be agile with that and be nimble to be able to say, all right, we can allocate it. It's not locked into something like ARPA funds or any general obligation budget funds that we have. I think that's a financially strategic position for the city to be in. And then that second point, the ability to increase. So with those dollars sitting at a certain amount, if we have our philanthropic community that wants to invest, or we come into other pots of money, we can put that into that account, and that account can generate more than the $10 to $12 million in interest that it does currently. But it gives you all in the city of St. Louis more opportunities. The second thing is investing in youth. So we talk about just homegrown talent here in St. Louis, and I think we do need to put a stronger emphasis on that. But we also know that we have school systems, plural, that are built for a city of 800,000, and we don't have that. So being able to provide financial incentives to LEAs, so education institutions that provide education to our youth and support our families here, to get some right sizing, because I think that, in conjunction with what you all are putting forth and what our development corporation is doing, is actually going to help to improve those educational systems. We see the shortfall of teachers. We see the shortfall of transportation options for all of our districts, and not just in St. Louis, but nationwide. But I think that right sizing financial support can incentivize a better citywide plan, or a citywide plan at all, for education. And then College Promise, which I know is an initiative of our city and out of our mayor's office, just helps to make sure that we are committing to our young people and ensuring that not only they get to college, but get the dollars to persist through. The last thing, which my office will be working on, regardless of if the dollars come out of the rent funding or not, but predatory lending alternatives. So we have a lot of institutions like a Justine Peterson and other CDFIs that lend at a certain level to support folks who are in the lowest of income classes to get out of predatory loans or high interest car loans at buy here, pay here places. But that really is a gap that's increasing. And when we talk about bridging generational divides, it's not just buying a house, but it's what are all the steps and things that I need to do or get out of to be able to get to that spot. And we have a real opportunity here. With interest rates going up, that does help our investment account, but that also means that it's lending rates are higher for the average citizen. So whether I'm buying a house or getting a stopgap loan, those things are higher. One of the things that we could do is create a pot of funding, and I've spoken with a lot of our bank partners, and they're willing to partner with us on this. But with us earning at 5%, being able to offer loans at and lend to everyday St. Louisans at 1 to 2% to account for those market gaps. And it's not like the city is actually taking a loss. It's that we still are generative and we still are earning money, but we're saying we know that that 3% gap or that 4% gap in that lending that we can account for and our banks can support on is actually going to grow our economic base in St. Louis by having people be more economically sustainable. And that's all the advice that I'll give today, but that's the report, and I'll take any questions that you have.
I'll go through the committee for questions. I just wanted to clarify for the public that we got 280 million, but we gave 30 million to the convention center off top, right? So we only ended up getting 250?
Yes. So, but that was all together. Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to get that clarity.
Mm-hmm.
And then
So that was, yeah, they got their allocation set aside.
okay. And then the order of seniority, Alderman Cone? No problem. I think Alderwoman Spencer would be next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't have any questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Oldenburg? Alderman Oldenburg? Alderman Narayan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to thank the treasurer for his report and his common sense here on pushing for an endowment. I think that that's the thing that makes the most sense to do with this amount of money. I know I've screamed it from the rooftops before, so I won't bore anyone else with it anymore, but I truly do believe that that's the best thing to do with this type of money. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Oldenburg. In case you're still online. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I don't have any questions. I too want to commend the treasurer on the work he's doing and the presentation today, and especially the work around predatory lending. I'm proud of the fact that we directly replaced a predatory lending institution with the bank in the 10th Ward, and I want to use that as an example and offer my help and support in that work moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderwoman Schweitzer.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, and thank you, Treasurer Lane, for being here. So you mentioned that the city had invested through your office the 280 million, but the convention center funds were part of that $280 million, and that has been transferred to the convention center or not? They haven't spent any of it yet.
It has not been yet, but they have their own account. We're just managing it.
They have their own account. So in their own account is their money, and any interest accrued that they don't spend stays with them too. It doesn't come back to the city of St. Louis, or does the city of St. Louis get the interest?
It goes to them because
Okay.
it's part of their account.
Okay, just trying to understand that.
Yeah.
And thank you for being here. I agree that the endowment fund and what it's used for, that's still a discussion, but I think a lot of people are really thinking endowment fund. So I appreciate that, and I appreciate your comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Alderwoman Velazquez.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Just want to echo my colleagues in their thanks for Treasurer Lane, your presentation. I don't have any direct questions, and just also want to throw in my support for the idea of an endowment. I do think that's a good move for our city, for not just now, but for the next generation.
Thank you. Alderman Browning.
Thank you. I don't have any questions either. Just want to thank Treasurer Wayne for being here, giving us an update, and showing us how we're responsibly handling this money right now to keep growing. It's really neat to see that number get larger, and just share my colleagues' comments as well about an endowment.
Thank you. Alderman Aldridge.
No questions.
Excellent. President Green is not with us today. I would just echo what everyone said. Thank you for this report, for coming in and giving an update. I think it's so important that we're taking the public with us. And I know a lot of people are like, you guys are not spending the money, but I think it helps them to see that while we don't spend a dollar of it, every dollar is helping us to gain on it. So thank you for just being willing to come and for your thorough presentation and letting us know what you might want to partner on later on as far as what we decide to do with the funds.
Thank you.
Okay. And then we will now hear from the mayor's office. They are going to do something similar as Treasurer Lane, but have a lot more things to report. I think one of the things that have happened as we've gone through the committee process, even if you look at the portal, if you listen to some of the public comment, some of the things that the public is interested in getting funded have actually already been funded and allocated through ARPA. So I wanted to be able to provide an opportunity to the public just to get an idea of the sorts of things that are kind of already in the works, even if they can't see them. And then I'm sure that the mayor's office, as well as alders, we all get questions all the time. Where is ARPA? Where is it at on spending? So I thought this just provided one opportunity to give the public and every alder an update on where those funds are and a chance to answer those questions. So just thank you all for being here today.
Oh, you guys taped that. Can't move that. Good afternoon. My name is Jared Boyd. I have the pleasure of serving as Chief of Staff to Mayor Tashara Jones. Thank you to the Board of Aldermen and the Committee of the Whole, Chairwoman Sanye. As you stated, today we're going to go over our annual evaluation report. This provides some metrics on how ARPA dollars have been spent and how they're impacting the St. Louis community. We've previously come before HUDs to provide a very thorough review of ARPA funds, and if there are questions that you all have that are very specific that I cannot answer, I will make sure that our departments promptly provide you with answers. So this report is an evaluation tool along with other evaluation tools that we have, and if you want to go to the next slide, I can begin to talk about how this report can be utilized. So this is our first annual evaluation report, but it's not the only tool that we use to report on ARPA. This is a high-level report that shows the number of people that have been impacted in important areas and provides some metrics that are digestible for folks and can be used in conjunction with some of our other tools if you want to go to the next slide. So we have other tools. We are required by the United States Treasury Department to file quarterly reports. Those are on our website. Those provide very in-depth tracking of ARPA expenditures. We have a transparency portal where residents can go and see how each dollar is being spent and committed. We have our Stronger STL website. That highlights some of our ARPA programs in a storytelling format, but also provides opportunities to apply for resources. And last but not least, we have this new evaluation report that we've been working on. So for our annual evaluation report, we're looking at 255 projects with 171 key performance indicators, spanning 21 agencies. And this has been a combination of looking at how other municipalities are tracking ARPA and performance indicators, and then prioritizing kind of really what we think are important in terms of measuring success. So very briefly, translating or transferring goals into actual evaluation questions that can be answered in this evaluation report is really the crux of this document. So in summary, as you all know, we received $498 million. As of July, $316 million of that has been programmed. And when we say programmed, that means a bill has been passed, There's been a contract or some other, usually a contract that goes through E&A, and the contract is signed. So, and then also that contract appears on the general ledger. So that's what we mean by programmed. And then spent 156 million, or about a third of the funds have been spent. So in looking at our evaluation report, we came up with 7 impact categories: public safety, housing stabilization, youth and family services, economic justice, infrastructure, public health and wellness, and city services. So if we go to the first category, public safety. So as you can see, about $31.4 million in ARPA funding has been appropriated to public safety. I will note that number does not cover most of the PSAP. The CAD or the software program is covered in this number. The vast majority of this number falls within the Office of Violence Prevention. And they have, they're on their way to obligating all of their funds. Some of the high or top line numbers that this report conveys: 16.9 million in funding for the CVI programming that they're doing, which includes 6 million, or on top of that, you have 6 million for a youth assessment center called The Way Forward. Those funds are under contract with Covenant House. So Office of Violence Prevention, as you know, was started under this administration, and we are thankful that you all are transitioning some of that funding to general revenue as we get under our feet. Another key number: over 11,000 residents or participants have been engaged in by the Office of Violence Prevention, and their or have been programs, 11,000 people have participated in the programs, and then almost 7,000 residents have attended an OVP-hosted event, whether it's a kickback or peace walk or other event that they have hosted. And if we go to the next slide. So one of the aspects about this report that is helpful is that it's not just statistics, but there's a geospatial aspect to this report. So we do map some of the services. And with the Office of Violence Prevention and Public Safety, we both have neighborhood-specific services. So Mission St. Louis and other providers are either located in neighborhoods where they're trying to make or trying to build relationships in those neighborhoods, or for other providers like Diamond Divas, which deals with domestic violence, or the T, those services are neighborhood agnostic. So they try and help people all across the city. There is a time lag in this report. It says 62 out of the 79 neighborhoods have been served. As of today, all 79 neighborhoods have been served by the Office of Prevention. Next category: youth and family support. Youth and family support, we've appropriated about $26 million to this category. Some of the high-level investments that we have made: $30.6 million in youth programming. That is in the form of after-school and weekend and out-of-school time. So any youth programming that services kids outside of youth hours. So organizations like Annie Malone, YMCA, Harambe Youth, St. Louis Artworks, and many more were recipients of this funding. Almost $2 million in support for child care providers in the form of grants to child care provider organizations. So recognizing that providers, particularly during COVID, had a gap in terms of cost versus the amount of money they were able to recoup from their customers. This is not listed in the high-level impact, but there's also additional money in the form of about $1.7 million that will be going towards early child care educators for tuition/upskilling. So helping individual early child care providers with the cost of their education. Early on, another number that's been raised, about 9,000 families that were helped with the $500 direct cash assistance program, over 1,000 families who were helped by the Gateway Go program. And with respect to youth jobs, we know that ARPA has funded at least 600 youth jobs, but that's an example of an ARPA investment that was matched by another entity. So SLPS actually matched the amount that the city spent. So we've been able to serve about over 1,300 students through the Learn and Earn program, where we've provided half of that funding. And this is just another map or spatial example of where the investments have been made with respect to the child care facilities that were helped with stabilization grants. As you can see, they touched several different parts of the city, particularly North St. Louis and parts of Southeast St. Louis, with some other areas as well. So economic justice, this is a category we've broadly spoken about economic justice, but this report breaks out housing stabilization from economic justice. So this number looks a little different. We often talk about a $286 million investment that includes some of the housing numbers that are separate. But within economic justice, these are funds that have gone to CDA or some of our development agencies. But this investment, this $105 million, does not underscore the total amount of investment, because similar to the child care subsidy or to the Learn and Earn program, we've been able to braid other sources of funding, city funding, for economic justice. So while there's over $100 million in projects, it doesn't completely encapsulate the overall investment. So one of the bigger investments is the Northside Small Business Grant Program. That was a highly competitive program, but 439 businesses received some funding through that program. We had over 700 applicants, 500 were deemed eligible, and out of those eligible applicants, there were over $400 million in funding requests for those funds. In terms of neighborhood beautification, there's several different ARPA programs that fund neighborhood beautification, which include our $13 million in private building stabilization, and then funds for rehabilitation of vacant lots, not to mention some of our beautification programs. So moving forward, one of the projects that's listed is the Monarch 15.4 acres site that we were able to acquire with ARPA dollars. If you guys have not been there, I highly encourage you all to visit the Monarch. It's the old Killark building, and it sits on 15.4 acres of land that we're going to be able to use, transform into a world-class workforce development center. ARPA has helped fund, we're not done there. I'll try and go faster if you're sending me a message. But ARPA helped fund the arts, which is very important. As a lot of you know, the Regional Arts Commission is funded by the hotel motel tax, which took a significant hit during COVID, and we were able to appropriate, with your assistance and help, over $10 million to the arts, and helping to do that, including helping individual artists, arts organizations, and the wonderful murals that are in your neighborhoods. Lastly, on this page, we're able to fund several or over 2,500 meals through ARPA funding. And this is another map. There was a small business program that provided $5,000 grants to 900 businesses across the city. And as you can see, several neighborhoods and businesses were served from this emergency stabilization funding. Public health and wellness, excuse me. A lot of these funds were spent dealing with the immediate impacts of COVID. So ARPA funding for COVID testing, vaccine incentives, and mobile vehicles, which will last beyond COVID, are some of the major investments that were made under this category. Not to mention about $13 million in funding for federally qualified health centers. So that money, again, was able to leverage state funding. So the total investment in those is not $13 million. It pulled down additional state funding for those projects. So that was, that's going to look like close to a $30 million investment. Moving on to housing stabilization. We've invested well over $100 million into housing stabilization. And as I've stated before, we oftentimes include these investments in our economic justice discussions. But for this particular presentation, we've broken it out. And some of the investments that are highlighted, $7 million for the healthy home repair, or $7 million that's been spent on the healthy home repair program. A total of $15 million has been allocated to that program. And like other funding, that is on top of other federal funds. So in 2022, we had 155 families that were served by the healthy home repair. Last year, we had well over 300 homes or families that were served by the program. So I expect that we will exhaust those funds well before 2026 and need to have discussions about how to make those type of investments sustainable. Housing stabilization also covers the emergency responses, whether it's through DHS or others that folks needed during COVID for case management, food, basic needs that have been funded. There were about almost 5,000 families served by the Emergency Rental Assistance Program, and ARPA has been able to fund 952 affordable units. But that number, again, I think we have about 2,400 affordable units that are in the pipeline funded in other ways as well. Infrastructure, almost $70 million in ARPA infrastructure investments. As you can see, we've got about $63 million in street improvements. That doesn't, I guess, encompass, like I said, other streams of funding. We have a website, Friendly Streets, that shows all of the transit projects or street improvement projects. But with ARPA funding, we'll be able to fund changing 30 miles of arterial streets and make our top 10 crash sites safer. And as I said before, our projects on this can be found at our Friendly Streets website. I encourage all those who are interested in that work to go to that website or direct their constituents to go to that website so that they can track some of these important projects that you all were able to help us appropriate and get off the ground. City services, almost $100 million in city services, including funding for rec centers and other critical capital improvements. We are working towards getting our public safety answering point, our 911 facility, and that is encompassed in our ARPA commitments. And with that, I did receive some questions ahead of time. I will answer those questions, and then, Madam Chair, I will open the floor to you to entertain any other questions that may have arisen during my presentation.
Thank you.
All right. So one of the questions.
Just for clarification. So anyone who sent questions, I sent out an email to every alder just saying, if you have any questions ahead of time. I forwarded those over to the mayor's office. So if you sent a question, then he should get into it. But of course, you'll also have an opportunity to ask any questions.
Sure. So we did receive a question about the categorization or the definition of how we say money is either committed or spent. We'll sometimes say committed as in obligated. So the definition of spent or obligated is that, or spent, I'll start with spent first, is that we've actually received a bill and paid that bill. As you know, a lot of times there's a lag between receiving a good or providing a service and actually paying that bill. So when we say spent, we've actually expended those dollars. Program or obligated means that a contract has been approved at E&A, or there's a personnel service, or there's been an intergovernmental agreement that's been fully executed. This evaluation program considers funds program once there's a board bill, once there's E&A approval, once there's a signed contract, and once the funds are posted on the general ledger. So that is how we make that distinction. We have been very clear with our departments, and I think we've been very clear with the public and you all that we expect all of the funds to be obligated by this fall, and that we will be coming before you with a bill to sweep any funds that are not obligated to ensure that we don't send any money or waste any money. So as of July, $316 million out of the $498 million has been committed or programmed, and that we have 2 E&As in which we will be committing or obligating the vast majority of these, and any funds that are not obligated after that time will be subject to a sweep. In terms of ARPA contracts in negotiation, any funds that are not obligated or not planned for a sweep bill are under negotiations, that they're close to a final contract, or they should be. There's an exception for intergovernmental agreements. So SLDC, for example, is a legal entity that can't receive direct appropriations from the board. So you all appropriated those funds to CDA, who then develops an intergovernmental agreement with SLDC. By Treasury guidelines, that intergovernmental agreement constitutes obligation of those funds. So that is an exception to fully executed contract where the program is ready to go. There was a question about active RFPs. To be quite frank, if there are funds that are still in the RFP process, there probably would not be time for us to fully contract for those programs. So unless funds are fall under an intergovernmental agreement, it is too late for RFPs. We need to be moving towards full contracts in order to meet our deadlines, and to kind of work with other departments and other agencies outside of the city that are responsible for making sure our contracts are fully executed. So if it seems as if there are no RFPs right now, that's, like I said, because if we were in the RFP phase for funds, then we would not be able to meet our 2024 deadline for obligating these funds. So those were the submitted questions that we received, and yes, thank you.
Thank you. And then I did notice that you have one more slide just about next steps for ARPA. Did you want me to read that off just in case that gets ahead of some questions coming to you?
Oh, we can go to there are, I think, there are one or two more slides
Yes,
left.
2 more slides.
Okay, we can go to those slides.
Just in the interest of time, I'll just read them off. You just have a slide that says next steps, ARPA SLRF funds have to be programmed by December 31st, 2024. So I just wanted to state that on the record because I bet there'll be some questions around, deadlines for this. And then ARPA SLRF funds have to be spent by December 31st, 2026. So they have to be programmed by the 31st, the end of this year, and then spent by the end of 2026. And then just to mention that RAM settlement funds have an opportunity to address immediate needs and save some of the funds for generational investments. And then just to mention the pillars of the Economic Justice Action Plan. I'd just like to complete everything we have in a drive in case there are some digital divides. People, in the audience may not have it put up, people are not at home. So I wanted to make sure everything that we had at least had been mentioned to the public. And with that, we can proceed with questions from the committee. Alderman Cone.
I think she was actually able to pull up the report or the next steps. So as Alderwoman Saunier mentioned, if you want to go back to the previous slide. Thank you. This money does have to be programmed by the end of this year. We are going to be very careful in that funds that are not programmed by the end of October will be subject to a sweep bill, and we will be working with the Board of Aldermen on that. We'll probably be looking at one project in particular. We have a significant funding gap with our PSAP, our 911 center, and I think this is an excellent opportunity to address that funding gap in a project that's already underway with a sweep bill. So we will be working with the HUD's committee and the Board of Aldermen for funds that are not committed by October to ensure that St. Louis does not return any funds to the Treasury Department. So we look forward to engaging with you in that process. Our departments are working very hard to make sure that funds are programmed, and if not, they know that those funds will, whether well-intentioned or not, be swept from their departments. These funds have to be spent by the end of 2026, and I think we do have to begin planning for the end, and one of the ways in which we plan for that end is with the Economic Justice Accelerator. So St. Louis Community Foundation is now home to the Economic Justice Accelerator. So if there are philanthropic organizations that want to continue to contribute to the work that has been started by ARPA, they will be able to invest in either specific projects or the overall work. There's also an opportunity for folks to, organizations or individuals, to use patient capital, get a low rate of return on specific projects. So as I stated before, this is a way of continuing the work that has been started by ARPA in funding those projects with non-ARPA dollars and non-city dollars to a certain extent. And then last but not least, because I'm before you at the Committee of the Whole, did want to opine not on specific allocations, but on some of the principles that the mayor has kind of been consistent about throughout the RAMS process. And I think if you want to go to the next slide, the RAMS funding is an opportunity to really build upon the goals of the Economic Justice Action Plan, in that the Economic Justice Plan is looking to strengthen neighborhoods, close the wealth gap, improve health and education outcomes, expand our tax base, and grow the city's population. In addition to fulfilling or finding uses that fulfill these goals, the mayor has been very clear that this money should last multi-generations. So whether it is an endowment, revolving loan funds, or leveraging other funds with these funds, she wants to ensure that these funds reach multiple generations. And I would say something else that we've learned from ARPA is that the city of St. Louis has a lot of needs, and $250 million alone cannot solve those needs. So in any investment that we make, we have to really think about it as an investment. How can we leverage other federal dollars? How can we leverage other philanthropic dollars? How can we leverage interest and other resources? Because $250 million is simply not enough to fill the needs of the city of St. Louis and our residents. So with that, thank you for your time, and look forward to continuing to work with you on getting these dollars spent in the best way possible.
Thank you, Chief Boyd. Alderman Cone. Alderwoman Spencer. Alderman Odenberg.
I have no questions. Thank you, Chairwoman.
No problem. Alderman Narayan.
No questions. Just want to thank Chief of Staff Boyd for the presentation, and I agree with him on the importance of getting these dollars out. As the Chair of Public Safety, I think that the PSAP would be an ideal way to spend these funds if we're at any risk of losing them. Like he said, it is a project that we've already made significant progress on, and we're hoping to break ground on in the near future. So that would be a good use for these funds if we can't get them out the door. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard.
No questions. Again, just want to thank you for the presentation today. I will go back over some information and be looking forward to working with you all in the Mayor's Office of the HUD Committee. And again, I want to also ditto my colleagues from the Fourth sentiments about the piece that we all hear about the importance of that in our communities and our neighborhoods. And I think we can make sure that we make the greatest impact with that. That would be a good step.
Thank you. Alderwoman Schweitzer.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, and thank you, Mr. Boyd, for being here and giving that presentation. So you answered a lot of my questions with the questions that my colleague sent you already. So you mentioned there being an upcoming potential for a sweep bill and having public safety answering point as potentially the receiver of those funds, and that's the conversation that I've heard. That's what I believe we've been talking about. But there's a big piece of that funding that was supposed to be coming from the state. And I think the state decided not to invest in that. Are they back in? Where is it? Can you give us the breakdown of the total cost of the project, where the city, how much the city has put in, what the state's put in, what we expect the gap to be?
Sure. So we were initially told that the state funding that we received for the PSAP believe it was about $10 million, that it would simply roll over. Okay. That, and as Alderman Aldridge can kind of attest, that those funds would be rolled over in a subsequent budget. At the last minute, those funds were actually taken out of the budget, so those funds were not rolled over, and we were forced with spending those funds or encumbering those funds by the end of the fiscal year. The Department of Public Safety and BPS did a yeoman's job in making sure we were able to actually encumber $10 million of funding from the state before the end of the fiscal year, working with our lobbyists. So while the state legislature attempted to take it out of the budget, and we were planning to initially expend local funds before drawing down those state funds, we had to switch order of operations at the last minute, so we were able to preserve that state fund.
That's great.
So currently it's about a $50 million project. There's about $16 million that's needed for the PSAP alone. I will note that there is a child care facility that is also being built next to the PSAP, so that would require an additional $5 million. So it's about a $50 million project when you look at the PSAP and the child care facility.
And how much has been allocated?
So we need about $16 million for the PSAP and $5 million for the child care facility. So city's allocated $18 million, and we've got $10 million in state funding.
Okay. Okay. And when you talked about getting to the end of the year and having that kind of as an upcoming discussion, when will we know what isn't going to be? Thank you. When will we know what isn't going to be happening?
Yes, that's a very good question. We are prepared to work with the Board of Aldermen to file the legislation in the early fall. We will know by October, because we have ENA. We will know after our October ENA which funds have not been obligated. So at that time, we will have a specific number that can be allocated. We initially tried to provide a sweep bill that was not specific to say if funds have not been obligated by October 31st or something, then they would automatically revert to a project like the PSAP. We've been provided with guidance from the City Councilor's office that appropriations need specificity. So I think we'll be in a position to, we have a preliminary understanding of what funds are not going to be able to be obligated because for some reason they had a few leftover dollars in a project that were not spent. But we will have a definitive number after October ENA as to what funds were not obligated at that time, and we're not going to extend any deadlines after that to ensure that we're able to move forward with this process.
And if more is being swept than the public safety answering point needs, I imagine that bill will also include that second thing.
I would say we'll cross that bridge when we get there, but I agree that that would warrant additional discussion.
Right.
We've been working on this all summer with our departments, and our preliminary numbers suggest that we'll be just under what we need for PSAP in terms of funds that cannot be obligated. But we will have a definitive answer in October for you.
And of course, the easiest thing to do would be to tie it to projects that are already ongoing, because the city would not have time to do another RFP process. So it is very likely going to be a project that's already in motion, whether it's public safety answering point, traffic calming, paving work, things that there are any identified gaps. Speaking of that, are departments also being asked to tell you there's not going to be enough money to finish this project? Is that communication also occurring?
I'm sorry, can you clarify that?
Are any departments letting you know if they're having, some are saying, oh, we have extra money left over, but are there any projects that people are flagging for you now that are going to need more?
I would say the question is not whether or not certain departments need more money, it's whether or not they can expend and obligate the money.
And that's why I mentioned the project specifically,
yes,
not
yes.
the departments in general, but
Yes.
say, as Representative of the far South Grand, for example, I know they're working north and paving south. So the last thing I want to have happen is Grand Boulevard can't be finished being paved. And so I want to make sure that if that's even at all a possibility, that there is money ready to fill that gap, and it's not going to be a budget hole we have to fill some other way, or
I think on some of the transportation projects, but for leftover ARPA funding that needs to be reallocated, there is going to be a capital appropriation. We did have, I believe, a surplus again last year. So whether it's the capital fund or other resources are going to have to be a part of that conversation as to some of our transportation projects, whether it's completing the projects. And then we also know that citizens have provided input on projects after they have been scoped. So we'll have to have those conversations as well, because we're still, and that's a wonderful thing about our kind of processes, is that citizens are able to provide feedback on these large once-in-a-generation transportation projects.
yeah. And I agree with that. And when the community members in my ward wanted more in the grand project, we allocated ward capital to cover what wasn't already covered by ARPA funds. So that's certainly already happening, but the paving and what was presented to them initially should be being covered by the ARPA funds that are supposed to be going into their communities. So I just want to make sure that those projects aren't left out. And because the Child Care Center, while I think it's really important, is sort of new to me and a new cost for the staff. So, I'm very interested in making sure that all of the streets get paved as they're supposed to, all the traffic calming happens as they're supposed to. And there's certainly so many capital projects and city services that need attention. I think the Water Division presented $400 million worth of, for example, and got $3 million. So, I just want to make sure that we're thinking about all the projects that have needs and everything that needs funding. So thank you. That's all my questions.
Thank you. Alderwoman Velasquez.
I have no questions. Thank you. And thank you, Chief of Staff Boyd, for your presentation today.
Thank you. Alderman Browning.
I have no additional questions. Thank you to my colleagues for asking such excellent questions, and thank you to Chief of Staff Boyd for being here.
Alderman Aldridge.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Chief of Staff, for being here. Just one question, so I am kind of clear where we are. So between the plan investment, the money that we started with, the $498 million, and what's programmed, that's roughly about $182 million that hasn't been programmed. Does that sound about right? From the 498, and you minus that with the 316, it's roughly still about 182 that would need to be programmed some way, somehow. And
sure, and I will note that there's a time lag between the numbers that are reported and presented. So these numbers are from July. So these numbers don't take into account August and parts of September. So
in the last 2 months, have we programmed additional, funds?
I would say yes, but unfortunately, there's a reporting time lag for those funds. But yes, there are still, like I said, funds that need to be obligated. We will have a better picture of what this number looks like after the September ENA, where additional contracts, I know Office of Violence Prevention, their numbers show that they have significant funds that are that need to be obligated by. I know they have, example, 7 contracts. So from their internal tracking, they've obligated about 90% of their funds, but that's not reflected on the dashboard or this data because there's a time lag. But yes, there is, like I said, significant funding that that needs to be obligated between now and October.
Okay, which is a huge amount in 1 month to, program and have most of the bills that needed to be, or most of the money that needed to be programmed. Would that have to come through the board to do that, or that's an ENA thing for programming to move, I guess, 182 as of right now from these numbers to get them to a place where they program? Because I guess if they're not programmed by next month, it's a lot of money that would be left on the table, right?
So let me try and distinguish between the ways funds are obligated. So, for instance, infrastructure funds don't typically go through the typical like professional service process. They go through BPS. So for our large transportation projects, the corridor projects, those funds are bid out, and I know most of those funds are bids were either due this last month or the previous month. So a lot of that transportation funding will be encumbered because the bids are in. There is significant CDA funding that will be appropriated, and as I stated, there are no active RFPs. So we are at the contracting stage for most of these funds.
Okay. So for those bigger funds, you're saying may not be, and this is just clarity for myself and for people back home with that number. So those bigger funds wouldn't necessarily need to go through the programming stage. They can just be bidded out.
If it's an infrastructure project, it may go through the BPS project of obligated, as opposed to a professional services RFP process.
Okay. And then from the goal is, if on the programming side at 316 million, if those funds, and that's not an up-to-date number because you say the 2 months, if those funds aren't programmed by next month, the plan is to bring a bill in front of HUDs to sweep those. And could you explain that a little bit more? Like sweep it and just put it in?
Sure. I use the term sweep, meaning that there are going to be several different projects and accounts associated with those projects. And the thought is that they are swept into one large account or one big project that we have certainty that can be accomplished. I think there are going to be some well-intentioned projects that just never got off the ground for whatever reason. Maybe it's the vendor, or there was a misunderstanding. Those types of projects, whether well-intentioned or not, come the end of October, our departments are very clear that if the funds are not obligated, then those funds will be reappropriated to a project that's already moving, where we have certainty that those funds will be spent.
Okay. So just between the, okay, I think that's my question. I'm just trying to see how much money is still out there. So between the 316 million that is in programming stage as of right now, that's the most up to date that we have in front of us. So if this was like October, which is a month away right now, we would have to sweep that and figure out how to spend that. On top of, there's still about 182 million from what we started with that is also out there to be used. But you said they may not have to go like a program, they can be bidded out or whatnot. So there's still like a large amount of money through the ARPA dollar that hasn't been programmed, spent, bidded out, and we're coming up, I guess, on a month timeline to be able to secure funds, even if it's not spent yet.
Sure. Like I said, I think, and we'll provide updates. We can provide additional updates outside of hearings, but we have been in close communication with our departments to ensure that they understand and understand the importance of deadlines, and a lot of the funds, because there is a time lag, we do have to work with them. And I provided the example of the Office of Violence Prevention. Because it's not on the they know where a lot of their contracts are, and to them, they have programmed approximately 90% of those contracts. But because of the time lag, the fact that they're not on the general ledger, those funds don't reflect that right now. But October is coming. It's not winter is coming, but October is coming for some of these departments, and they are very clear that the funds will be taken back if they're not fully obligated by then.
Okay. And I guess once we get to October and we get to that sweeping part where if things are on program, and when we get back in front of HUDs, we will have, is there a way to have, I know the portal is not always, as you say, up to date. We'll have an updated amount at that committee hearing of, I guess, where we are and where we need to move to make sure all these funds are spent by 2026, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I had a question. I wanted to just, I think a point of clarity, just clarify what you meant. Sweep bill, you mean we may end up seeing one bill that encompasses the remaining funds that have yet to be programmed, correct?
It is our intention to bring one final bill to reappropriate these funds because after the end of 2024, we legally cannot reobligate these.
Thank you. I just want to make sure. I know people don't follow our policy jargon all the time, so I always like to make sure it's understandable. Under the public safety expenditures, this was in the report, not in your presentation, just in a report that I read through. There's a Save Lives Now program. Can you expound a bit more on that program and what it's about?
Sure. The Save Lives Now program it builds upon the CVI work that the city is doing, but I believe in the last appropriation, we set aside about $1 million, if I'm not mistaken, to really regionalize the work that we're doing, not necessarily spend these funds outside of the city, but spend them in coordination with our partners in St. Louis County and in St. Clair County across the river. So through East-West Gateway, we have agreed upon 3 interventions. So focus deterrence, cognitive behavioral therapy, and street outreach. And each jurisdiction is going to work in coordination on those 3 issues. One of the greatest lessons that we learned from going into our data on crime is that about 30% of our homicide victims are from outside of the city of St. Louis, and about 30% of the perpetrators who are involved in homicide are also from outside of the city of St. Louis. So crime really doesn't respect boundaries, and unless there are regional efforts around coordination, then it's difficult to move the needle. So we've set about an ambitious goal of reducing homicides on a regional basis with our partners for 20% over 3 years after the program is launched. So it's building upon a lot of the work that's been done in the city already. On violence prevention, we're happy to see St. Louis County moving in that direction. They recently hired, I believe, a coordinator to do some of the work that Will Pinckney does. Additionally, East-West Gateway has a coordinator for this project that will oversee this project, which will probably also include making sure that funding is sustainable for this work. But this is one of the first regional efforts that I know of around specific interventions around crime.
Thank you. Around on page 8 of the report, there's a mental health board assisted childcare location. And then the intro paragraph, it basically, from yesterday, what you sent over, it basically just shows about $1.9 million have been given to in funding to providers to cover the period. But I noticed that the period was between January 2021 and December 2021. So I was just asking for clarification. Has there been any additional funding allocated to providers or families in need of child care as direct payments since that?
So not necessarily to child care providers. So we've, through cooperation with the Board of Aldermen, Board of Estimate and Apportionment, you all have made 2 significant investments in early child care rather. And that was the initial emergency stabilization grants for almost $2 million, and then subsequently providing funding for early childhood educators to receive tuition reimbursement or reimbursement for certification. So that funding for the tuition reimbursements, I mean, we're working with several providers like, I forget, I have a list of them that I can provide to you. Guardian Settlement, Child Care Aware, Beginning Futures, Fallen Tenant Association, Flance, United for Children. So we're working with those providers to actually help their educators in their building with whether it's tuition or other forms of upskilling. So to summarize, no, we have not provided additional money specifically to provider centers since 2021 or since the expenditure of the almost $2 million.
Okay, thank you. And then at the very, very end of the report, there are just some KPIs listed. I don't have to name specifics, but you had some of them in your presentation in terms of like $6 million planned funds to support youth diversion, $3.5 million planned to engage youth in programs. Are these amounts, they haven't been distributed, but they are things that you're, they're key performance indicators. Are they things that you're thinking of that might be in the sweep bill, or I just had a question about that, those sections.
Sure. While we're proud of the work that we've done with the Office of Violence Prevention and with some of our other direct services, when we think of the sweep bill, I think we're going to really look at a particular project that we 100% sure or 99.9% sure that we'll be able to expend those funds within not just the 2026 horizon, but make sure they're obligated by the 2024 horizon. With respect to the Office of Violence Prevention, I want to thank the board again for supporting the use of general revenue dollars to start to support that work. We know a lot of that work has been funded by ARPA, and once ARPA is no longer there, we're going to have to rely on grants, general revenue, other sources of money to continue that work. So I don't, with respect to the sweep bill, I don't know if services would be kind of ideal for that, given the timing of needing to obligate those funds.
And for the child care facility that you would put next to if we revisited the Peace app, was that in connection to what I think Director Coyle came in and spoke to? I'm not sure if he spoke to public safety or HUDs, but he indicated that he was exploring the option of making child care services available to our first responders. Is that what the child care facility next to the Peace app, is that what that $5 million would be for?
Well, the $5 million would be for a physical building that could be located near the Peace app. We don't have the skill set to operate a child care center, so we'd have to find a partner to work with. But the availability of 24-hour child care we know is something that's needed by our first responders and other folks who work second and third shifts. So we think we have the land. We made this pitch to the state when we got the initial $10 million for the Peace app. So we think it's much needed, but it is currently not fully funded. So we'll have to continue to look for additional resources to fulfill that opportunity.
Understood. I just wanted to put that on record because I know our committees are kind of broke up. I am in support of the idea of offering, childcare to our first responders. I think childcare is imperative. It has unyielding types of benefits, and I think starting with first responders makes sense. But I would say, starting with it and starting with them before we can look at options of building it out further. With that, I think that completes all the questions from the committee, and so we can move to public comment. So just as a reminder for folks in the room, if you're wanting to testify, there is a sign-in that is in front of the desk over here that you just want to sign. And Chief Boyd, was there any final comments? Are you good? Wasn't trying to rush you out, I'm sorry. I wasn't trying to rush you, I just wanted to make sure you got everything out that you wanted to say.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
We only have one speaker that's signed up, and that's Elaine Laura.
The one that reasoned with MSD, Elaine Laura.
I'm going to get you, excellent.
2400 block of Enright.
Okay, I'm just going to get you sworn in. And do you promise that what you're about to say is the truth and the whole truth?
Yes.
Excellent. 3 minutes. You may proceed.
Only 3 minutes? I want to thank the committee here, even though the attendance is sparse. I appreciate the round.
Can you make sure you speak into the mic? I want to make sure people at home.
Okay, yeah. Everybody else was mumbling. I appreciate the Rams portal. It has given me some relief. I just want to say that recently on the city's website, I saw that there was a request for proposals to upgrade that beautiful sustainability plan. And I reread the sustainability plan, and there were 5 instances that said, install water meter. And the sustainability plan was an opportunity to address long-term impact on the city of St. Louis. And I wish we could see it. One of the biggest concerns is that flat rate billing, as implemented by both the Water Enterprise and MSD, does not meet industry standards. Unmetered water customers are being gouged, subject to extortion by this inferior, inequitable, and unjust billing method. Plus, the attributes utilized are unverified and inaccurate in many cases. STL will be correcting a terrible wrong by installing AMRs as directed by 2 adopted plans, Sustainability 2013 and Climate Action and Adaptation 2017. Finally, that's not my end, by installing automatic water meters, STL will make a lasting impact and have something tangible to point to 5, 15, 30 years from today. As Mayor Slade wrote in the 2017 CAP, implementation of the measure will take community leadership, vision, and everyone working together to create an equitable, healthy, and climate resilient city. Please, I would like to continue. Standards of metering all water taken into the system and all water distributed from the system at its customer's point of service is what the American Water Works best principles state.
I'm sorry, your time is up.
You can finish your thought.
This is STL's chance to rectify an inadequate and unjust billing system. My one and only grandchild turned 21 in August, and we took a little cruise, and we went to the Dominican Republic, one of the stops, and we took the country tour, and it was very jungle-like, and I saw rain barrels everywhere. So when I got home, I went on the website and to find out what type of water they had in this area. And unmetered, flat rate billing. And I felt sick because I remembered the poverty on that tour. And I said, St. Louis, STL, whatever we are calling ourselves, we're unmetered water. It's shameful.
Thank you, Ms. Lane.
You're welcome. Oh, I'm mourning the loss of me, the one that recently.
Okay. All right. I just want to thank all of the members of the public who joined us today. I want to thank the mayor's office and the treasurer's office for coming out today to give us an update. I would encourage anyone who watches this or may watch this back later, if you have any questions that you did not get answers to about anything that you saw today, please feel free to email that to myself or your specific alder, and we will do our best to get you answers as this proceeds. It's been almost a year since this committee has been formed, and I'm very proud of what we've done in our year. Of course, we still have some new topics to cover, and even some topics to revisit so that we can have them in full conversation. But I'm just really grateful for everything that we've been able to get through and discuss and parse through today. And with that said, I will entertain a motion to continue Committee of the Whole to our next meeting on October 8th at 3 p.m. here in the Kennedy Room and virtually.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Alderman Browning and seconded by Alderwoman Schweitzer that we will continue the Committee of the Whole meeting on 8th at 3 p.m. in the Kennedy Room and virtual. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. See you October 8th.